They always say success is the sweetest revenge, but what about when success isn't what you were aiming for? When I discovered my boss of 6 years had been systematically stealing my marketing strategies and claiming them as his own, while telling me to my face I'd never make it in this industry without his connections, I learned that some betrayals don't just hurt you. They fundamentally change your path forward in ways you never imagined. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I still remember that morning like it happened yesterday, not 3 years ago. The polished conference room of Sheldon Digital Solutions gleamed under recessed lighting, the floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Lakeside Harbor's skyline. I'd spent the weekend perfecting my presentation, rehearsing until my roommate begged me to stop. This pitch for the Green Business Initiative could change everything, not just for the agency, but for my career. My name is Sophia Martinez, and at that point, I'd been Sheldon Digital's lead content strategist for 6 years. I'd joined fresh out of college, eager and idealistic, believing Victor Sheldon when he said he valued innovation and fresh perspectives. Over time, I'd watched my ideas implemented, my strategies praised, but never with my name attached. It was always Sheldon Digital's approach, or Victor's innovative strategy. I'd convinced myself this was normal, that paying dues meant accepting that your work belonged to the company, not to you. That morning, I arrived early to set up, arranging pristine copies of my proposal on Italian leather portfolios. Victor insisted on these touches of luxury, my stomach fluttering with a mix of excitement and nerves. This wasn't just another campaign. The Green Business Initiative represented everything I believed in, using digital marketing to help sustainable companies compete against industry giants with massive advertising budgets. Victor arrived last, as always. At 52, he cultivated a certain image: designer suits, meticulously maintained silver hair, the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. He nodded at me briskly before turning his full attention to our potential clients. "Daniel, Olivia, so glad you could make it," he said, shaking hands with Daniel Washington and Olivia Chen, the co-founders of Eco Connections, the organization behind the Green Business Initiative. "You're going to be impressed with what we've developed." I gave my presentation, walking through the comprehensive digital strategy I'd designed, content pillars built around sustainability education, targeted micro-campaigns for different demographics, an innovative social media approach leveraging user participation in environmental initiatives. The strategy wasn't just creative, it was backed by research, by data, by my understanding of how to make ethical businesses stand out in a crowded digital landscape. Throughout my presentation, Victor nodded along, occasionally interjecting with, "As I was explaining to Sophia," or "This builds on our previous discussions." Small claims of ownership that seemed insignificant in isolation, but added up to something more insidious. Daniel and Olivia asked thoughtful questions, which I answered with the confidence that comes from truly knowing your subject. When I finished, the energy in the room was palpable. This wasn't just a good pitch, it was exactly what they'd been looking for. "This is remarkable," Olivia said, looking at me directly. "You've captured exactly what we've been trying to articulate about our vision." "Sophia is one of our most promising team members," Victor interjected smoothly. "We've been developing this approach in our strategy sessions for months. It's a perfect example of how Sheldon Digital cultivates talent while maintaining our signature: excellence." I kept my expression neutral, used to this dance. Victor taking partial credit was expected. The proposal would move forward, the work would be brilliant, and Sheldon Digital would add another success story to its portfolio. My name would appear somewhere in the fine print, if at all. Daniel leaned forward, looking genuinely impressed. "We'd like to move forward. This is exactly the fresh thinking we've been looking for." Victor beamed, reaching out to shake hands. "Wonderful. I'll have contracts drawn up immediately. Sophia can handle the implementation details once we finalized the strategic direction. The meeting ended with handshakes and promises. As Victor escorted Daniel and Olivia out, I stayed behind to gather my materials, already thinking about how to bring this campaign to life. I was so absorbed that I didn't notice Natalie Parker, our digital analytics director, standing in the doorway. "That was impressive, Sophia," she said quietly. "Truly innovative work." I smiled, appreciating the acknowledgement. Natalie was relatively new to the company, but had quickly earned respect for her straightforward approach and analytical brilliance. "Thanks. I'm excited to get started on implementation. You should be presenting this at the Digital Marketing Summit next month," she continued, a slight frown creasing her forehead. "This strategy deserves recognition." I laughed, but there was little humor in it. "Victor's already confirmed as the speaker. You know how it works around here." Natalie's expression darkened. "All too well." She hesitated, then added, "Just don't let him—" She stopped as Victor re-entered the room, practically radiating satisfaction. "Excellent work in there, team. Sophia, make sure the implementation plan is on my desk by Thursday. I want to review it before I meet with them again next week." "I thought we were doing the follow-up meeting together," I said, something tightening in my chest. "No need for both of us. I've got it covered." He checked his watch. "I need to prepare for my interview with Marketing Innovators magazine. They're doing a feature on the agency's rise under my leadership." After he left, Natalie and I exchanged glances but said nothing. What was there to say? This was how things operated at Sheldon Digital. Victor was the face of the company, the visionary, the name that clients recognized. The rest of us were simply components in his well-oiled machine. I returned to my office, pushing down the familiar frustration as I focused on the implementation plan. This project mattered. The work mattered. That's what I kept telling myself as I outlined campaign timelines and content calendars. That evening, I stayed late, as usual. The office gradually emptied, people calling out goodbyes as they headed home to families, to dinners, to lives outside these glass walls. By 8 o'clock, I thought I was alone until I heard voices from Victor's office, his door slightly ajar, light spilling into the darkened hallway. "The Green Business Initiative is perfect timing," Victor was saying, "especially with the marketing. Excellence Awards coming up. This campaign will secure our nomination." I slowed my steps, not intending to eavesdrop but caught by the mention of the project. "What about Sophia?" A male voice asked. "Jason, our legal counsel. She created the entire strategy. If she finds out you're submitting it for the awards—" "Under your name?" "Sophia's talented but naive," Victor replied, his tone dismissive. "She lacks the connections, the presence to lead at this level. The strategy is good, but it needs my experience behind it to succeed. Besides, she works for Sheldon Digital. Her work belongs to the agency." "And the agency is you," Jason said, not quite a question. "Exactly. Look, I'm doing her a favor. She'd never succeed with this on her own. Without my connections, my reputation, she'd be just another creative with big ideas and no platform. This way, the work gets recognized, the agency grows, everyone benefits." I stood frozen, my heart pounding so loudly I was certain they would hear it. The casual cruelty, the absolute certainty that I needed him more than he needed me, it was breathtaking. "What about the summit presentation?" Jason asked. "She might expect to be involved." Victor laughed. "Already handled. I'm bringing in Marcus from the Los Angeles office to help polish the presentation. By the time the summit arrives, this will be positioned as a Sheldon Digital initiative that my team executed. Standard procedure." I backed away silently, my mind racing. Standard procedure. That's what hit hardest, the realization that this wasn't an isolated incident. This was systematic. This was how Victor had built his reputation, his agency, his success. by harvesting the talents of people who believed in his mentorship. Instead of heading back to my office, I found myself in the copy room, hands shaking slightly as I gathered my personal notes for the Green Business Initiative. All my research, my initial concepts, my development process, evidence of my authorship that existed outside the company servers. Not company property, but the evolution of my thinking as a marketer. I wasn't stealing. I couldn't steal what was fundamentally mine. But I knew in that moment that something had shifted irrevocably. The trust that had allowed me to accept Victor's behavior, to believe that paying dues would eventually lead to recognition, had shattered. That night, I didn't go straight home. Instead, I drove to Greenfield Park, where my Uncle Frank often walked his dog in the evenings. Uncle Frank had built his own accounting firm from nothing after being passed over for partnership at a prestigious firm 20 years ago. If anyone would understand what I was feeling, it would be him. I found him by the duck pond, tossing occasional treats to his elderly golden retriever, Max. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. When he saw my face, he simply sat on a nearby bench and patted the space beside him. "Something happened," he said. Not a question. I told him everything. The presentation, the overheard conversation, the years of having my work claimed by Victor while being told I should be grateful for the opportunity. Uncle Frank listened without interruption, his weathered face thoughtful. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, watching Max investigate a cluster of reeds at the pond's edge. "What would you do?" I finally asked. "If you found out someone had been taking credit for your work for years?" He smiled slightly. "I did find that out, remember? That's how I ended up starting my own firm. And you succeeded. Eventually." He turned to face me directly. "But this isn't about what I would do, Sophia. It's about what you want to build. Are you angry at Victor for taking credit, or for making you believe you needed him to succeed?" The question hit me with unexpected force. What exactly had broken my trust? Was it the theft of credit, or the realization that I had allowed myself to be diminished by someone else's assessment of my worth? Both, I admitted. I'm angry that he's using my work to further his reputation. But I'm furious with myself for believing I needed his approval, his platform, his connections to be valuable. Uncle Frank nodded. So the real question isn't what to do about Victor. It's what to do about your own path forward. We talked until the park lights came on, casting long shadows across the grass. Uncle Frank didn't tell me what to do. That wasn't his way. Instead, he asked questions that helped me clarify what I truly wanted. Not just recognition for my work, but the freedom to create on my own terms, to build something that reflected my values rather than someone else's limitations. By the time we parted, I had the beginnings of a plan, not a dramatic confrontation or resignation. Those would only reinforce Victor's narrative that I needed him. No, this would require something more strategic, more patient. "Whatever you decide," Uncle Frank said as we hugged goodbye, "remember that the most successful people aren't those with the most connections. They're the ones who connect others to something meaningful." I returned to work the next day with new clarity. For the next 2 weeks, I performed my job exactly as expected, completing the implementation plan for the Green Business Initiative, attending strategy meetings, maintaining the perfect professional facade. But my evenings and weekends were dedicated to building something new. First, I reached out to Natalie, whose analytical expertise complemented my creative approach. Over coffee at Harbor View Cafe, I shared what I'd overheard and my emerging vision for a different kind of digital marketing agency, one built on transparency, ethical practices, and genuine partnership with clients. "You're talking about competing directly with Victor," she said, stirring her latte thoughtfully. "That's a significant risk." "I'm talking about creating an alternative," I corrected. For clients who value authenticity over prestige, collaboration over hierarchy. Natalie studied me for a long moment, then nodded. I've been approached by Horizon Media twice in the past month, but I'd rather build something new than join another established agency with the same problems. Count me in. Next was Rebecca Torres, a former Sheldon Digital copywriter who had left 6 months earlier to freelance. Her writing had always captured the emotional core of even the most technical subjects, making her perfect for the sustainability-focused clients I envisioned. One by one, I connected with people whose talent I respected and whose values aligned with my vision. Jason Lee, a technical specialist frustrated by how his user experience innovations were constantly simplified to cut costs. Olivia Chen from Eco Connections, whose expertise in sustainability communications would be invaluable. Even Daniel Washington, who had connections throughout the green business community. We met in various locations, coffee shops, co-working spaces, once even on Daniel's sailboat, gradually shaping what would become Authentic Impact, a digital marketing agency specifically focused on helping ethical businesses communicate their value in an authentic, impactful way. Through it all, I maintained my role at Sheldon Digital, watching as Victor presented my Green Business Initiative strategy at the Digital Marketing Summit, accepting congratulations for his visionary approach. I completed the implementation, exactly as instructed, ensuring the campaign's success while documenting every aspect of my contribution. The strategy worked brilliantly. Within 2 months, the Green Business Initiative had exceeded all projections, generating significant growth. For the participating companies, Victor was featured in Marketing Innovators magazine, photographed in his office with my campaign materials visible on the screens behind him. It was during this period of apparent success that Victor called me into his office for what he termed a career development discussion. The afternoon sun streamed through his floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the numerous awards displayed on his credenza, several for campaigns I had conceptualized. "Sophia," he began, leaning back in his ergonomic chair, "I've been impressed with your implementation of the Green Business Initiative. You've shown real growth in executing strategic direction." "Thank you," I replied, keeping my expression neutral. "The campaign results speak for themselves." "Indeed they do." He smiled, the expression not quite reaching his eyes. "Which is why I think it's time we discussed your future at Sheldon Digital." Here it came, perhaps a minor promotion, a small raise, just enough to keep me grateful, committed, and generating ideas he could claim. "I've decided to restructure the content department," he continued. "We're bringing in Margaret Williams from Apex Solutions to take over as content director. Her experience with larger agencies will help us scale as we attract more significant clients." I blinked, genuinely surprised. "And my role?" "You'll report to Margaret, focusing on implementation for our sustainability clients. Your experience with the Green Business Initiative makes you perfect for executing the strategies we develop." The message was clear. I was being sidelined, pushed further from strategy development and deeper into execution. A skilled worker rather than a creative partner. May I ask why? I kept my tone curious rather than confrontational. Victor's smile tightened. "Sophia, you're an excellent tactician, but director-level positions require certain qualities: presence, authority, connections in the industry. I value your contributions, but leadership roles demand more than good ideas. They require influence." There it was, the same dismissal I'd overheard months ago, now delivered directly to my face. I should have felt angry, hurt, perhaps even panicked about my career. Instead, I felt something unexpected: gratitude. Victor had just confirmed what I needed to know about his vision for my future at Sheldon Digital. There was none. "I understand," I said simply. "When does this transition take effect?" "Margaret starts next month. I wanted to give you time. to adjust to the new structure. I nodded, already mentally calculating timelines. I appreciate your transparency. As I left his office, I felt lighter than I had in years. The last piece of uncertainty had been removed. It was time for the next phase. 2 days after my conversation with Victor, I submitted my resignation letter. Not in a dramatic flourish, not with accusations or recriminations, but with professional courtesy that revealed nothing of my actual plans. I gave the standard 2 weeks' notice, explained that I was pursuing new opportunities, and expressed gratitude for my time at Sheldon Digital, the perfect resignation of a model employee who harbored no ill will. Victor accepted it with a raised eyebrow and a condescending smile. Going freelance, I assume? It's a tough market out there, especially in this economy. Something like that, I replied, maintaining my pleasant expression. He leaned back in his chair, the afternoon sun glinting off his designer watch. Well, I wish you luck. This industry runs on connections, Sophia. Remember that when you're trying to build a client base on your own. I'll keep that in mind. And of course, don't forget your non-compete agreement. His tone remained casual, but his eyes had hardened. Sheldon Digital clients are off limits for 18 months after your departure. Our legal team takes these matters very seriously. I nodded, having anticipated this reminder. Of course, I understand the terms completely. What Victor didn't know, what he couldn't have anticipated, was that I had already consulted with an attorney who specialized in employment contracts. My non-compete was enforceable only for directly soliciting current Sheldon Digital clients. It couldn't prevent me from working in the same industry, with the same expertise, or even with companies that approached me independently after hearing about my new venture. More importantly, it couldn't prevent someone like Daniel Washington from recommending my services to his extensive network of sustainability-focused businesses that had never worked with Sheldon Digital. My final 2 weeks at the agency unfolded with meticulous professionalism. I documented all my processes, trained my replacement, and ensured smooth transitions for all my projects. To anyone watching, I was simply a dedicated employee ensuring a professional exit. Beneath this performance, however, authentic impact was taking shape. The day after submitting my resignation, I signed a lease on a small office space in the Breakwater building, a recently renovated warehouse in the Marina District, an area of Lakeside Harbor undergoing revitalization. With exposed brick walls, abundant natural light, and significantly lower rent than downtown, it embodied exactly the values our new agency represented: authenticity, transparency, and practical sustainability. Natalie gave notice at Sheldon Digital 3 days after I did. Victor was visibly annoyed, especially when she declined his counteroffer of a substantial raise. Rebecca, already freelancing, formally joined our team the following week. Jason arranged to transition over the next month, giving himself time to train his replacement while helping us establish our technical infrastructure. The foundation of authentic impact was solidifying, but we needed clients. This is where my patience and strategic planning paid off. Throughout my years at Sheldon Digital, I had built relationships with numerous professionals in the sustainability sector, not as potential clients, which would violate my non-compete, but as sources of insight, as collaborators on thought leadership pieces, as fellow attendees at industry conferences. These connections formed a network of people who knew my work, respected my expertise, and understood my values. One evening, during my final week at Sheldon Digital, I received a text from Olivia Chen. "Heard you're making changes. Coffee tomorrow?" We met at Harbor View Cafe the next morning before work, the sun just beginning to sparkle on the water. Olivia wasted no time on small talk. "Daniel told me you're starting your own agency," she said, stirring her tea. "Focused on ethical businesses and sustainability." I nodded, careful with my words. "I'm exploring new directions, yes. My values have always centered on helping purpose-driven organizations communicate effectively. The Green Business Initiative has been remarkably successful, she continued. The participating companies have seen significant growth in engagement and conversion. I'm glad to hear it. She studied me for a moment, then smiled. You're being cautious. I respect that. Let me be direct then. I'm leaving Eco Connections next month to launch a sustainability consulting firm. I'll need a marketing partner who truly understands this space, not just someone who sees green businesses as a trending market segment. My heart beat faster, but I maintained my composure. That sounds like an exciting venture? It is. And to be perfectly clear, I was impressed by the strategy presented at Sheldon Digital. But I've worked in this field long enough to recognize when someone truly understands sustainability messaging versus when they're applying conventional marketing approaches with a green veneer. She reached into her bag and pulled out a business card, not for Eco Connections, but for Terra Strategy, her new venture. Once you're officially launched, I'd like to discuss how we might work together. No pressure, but the opportunity is there. That conversation was the first domino. By my final day at Sheldon Digital, 3 more potential clients had reached out through similar channels. People who had encountered my work, recognized its value, and were interested in what I might create outside the constraints of a traditional agency structure. My last afternoon at Sheldon Digital was surreal. I packed my few personal items into a small box, said goodbye to colleagues who had become friends, and stepped out of the gleaming high-rise into the bright spring afternoon. 6 years of my professional life concluded without ceremony, without acknowledgement of all I had contributed. As I walked to my car, I received a text from Victor. Margaret's starting Monday. Send her your contact info in case she has questions about the sustainability accounts. No thank you. No good luck. Not even a perfunctory acknowledgement of 6 years of dedication. Just one final extraction of value before I departed. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I drove to the Breakwater building where Natalie and Rebecca were waiting to help set up our new office. The space was still mostly empty, just a few desks we'd purchased secondhand, a conference table donated by Uncle Frank, and a coffee maker that Rebecca insisted was essential infrastructure. As we unpacked supplies and discussed layout options, my phone buzzed with another text from Victor. Did you get my message about Margaret? I showed the screen to Natalie and Rebecca. Should I respond? Absolutely, Rebecca said with a mischievous smile. Give him your new business email at Authentic Impact. We laughed, but I opted for a more measured approach, simply confirming that I'd make myself available if Margaret had questions. No need to reveal our plans prematurely. The next 4 weeks passed in a blur of activity. While Natalie established our analytics frameworks and Rebecca developed our content approach, I focused on building our business framework, everything from registering the company and setting up banking to defining our service models and pricing structures. Uncle Frank proved invaluable during this period, connecting me with his network of small business resources. Accountants who specialized in creative startups, lawyers experienced in marketing contracts, even a commercial insurance agent who understood our unique needs. This is why you succeed, I told him one evening as we reviewed our financial projections. Not because you have the right connections, but because you connect people with what they actually need. He smiled, obviously pleased by the observation. That's exactly it, Sophia. True influence isn't about who you know. It's about how you bring value to the relationships you have. By the end of that first month, Authentic Impact had secured 3 clients: Terra Strategy, Olivia's new venture; Coastal Conservation Coalition, a regional environmental nonprofit; and Green Start Incubator, an organization supporting sustainable business startups. None had ever worked with Sheldon Digital, keeping us safely within the bounds of my non-compete agreement. Our first official meeting as an agency was both terrifying and exhilarating. Gathered around our conference table, Natalie, Rebecca, Jason, who had finally joined us full-time, and myself, I felt a momentary wave of doubt. Were we really ready to compete in an industry dominated by established agencies with decades of reputation and endless resources? "I know what you're thinking," Natalie said, recognizing my expression. "We're small, we're new, we're taking a huge risk." "We're also better," Rebecca added confidently. "We're offering something different, genuine partnership versus the traditional agency model where clients are merely buying access to expertise they can never quite possess themselves." Jason nodded in agreement. "I've spent my career watching agencies like Sheldon Digital create artificial complexity to justify their fees. We're building transparency into our entire process. That's revolutionary in this industry." Their confidence steadied me. This wasn't just about proving Victor wrong or finding personal validation. We were creating an alternative approach to digital marketing, one built on collaboration rather than dependency, on shared success rather than extracted value. Our first campaigns launched the following week. The work was challenging, the hours long, the learning curve steep. I wasn't just creating strategy anymore. I was leading a team, managing client relationships, overseeing finances, and still contributing to creative development. There were moments when I missed the simplicity of focusing solely on my area of expertise, the security of a regular paycheck, even the clarity of knowing exactly where I fit in the organizational hierarchy. But with each client meeting, each campaign milestone, each problem solved collectively rather than dictated from above, I felt a growing certainty that we were building something valuable, something necessary in an industry that too often prioritized perception over authenticity. 2 months after our launch, an unexpected opportunity emerged. Daniel Washington contacted me about an upcoming pitch for Meridian Group, a consortium of mid-sized businesses committed to sustainable practices. They were seeking a marketing partner for a major initiative aimed at demonstrating that ethical business practices could deliver superior market results. "They've narrowed it to 2 agencies," Daniel explained over lunch at a small cafe near our office. "Sheldon Digital and another downtown firm. But several board members have expressed concerns about the traditional agency approach." I set down my fork, suddenly not hungry. "Victor will be pitching personally, I assume." Daniel nodded. "Next Tuesday. He's been leveraging the success of the Green Business Initiative heavily in preliminary discussions. The irony wasn't lost on me. Victor would be using my strategy, my understanding of sustainability marketing, to secure a client that perfectly aligned with Authentic Impact's mission. "I've mentioned your new venture to a few key board members," Daniel continued, his expression carefully neutral. "They're intrigued by your approach. If you could send over some information, they might consider adding Authentic Impact to the pitch list." My mind raced with implications. This would be our first opportunity to compete directly with Sheldon Digital, a David versus Goliath scenario where we'd be presenting against an established agency with significantly more resources, more case studies, and yes, more industry connections. It would also be the first time I'd face Victor professionally since leaving his agency. The thought sent a mixture of anxiety and determination coursing through me. "We'd be honored to be considered," I said, making my decision. "I'll send materials this afternoon." By the time I returned to the office and shared this development with the team, my initial trepidation had transformed into focused determination. This wasn't just a potential client. It was an opportunity to demonstrate exactly what made Authentic Impact different. "We can't compete with Sheldon Digital on size or history," I told my team as we gathered to discuss our approach. "So we won't try. We'll lead with what makes us unique. Our collaborative process, our transparency, our genuine expertise in sustainability communications." For the next 5 days, we worked intensively to prepare our pitch. Natalie analyzed the sustainability, market positioning of every company in the Meridian Group, identifying patterns and opportunities. Rebecca developed messaging frameworks that highlighted each company's unique contributions while strengthening the collective impact. Jason created data visualization tools that would allow real-time tracking of campaign performance, making our process completely transparent to clients. I focused on the core strategy, not just marketing sustainable practices, but transforming sustainability from a corporate responsibility initiative into a central brand value that drove consumer preference and loyalty. The night before the presentation, I found myself unable to sleep, reviewing our materials over and over, imagining Victor's approach, anticipating his arguments against an untested startup. Around midnight, I received a text from Uncle Frank. Remember, they're not just hiring an agency. They're choosing partners who share their values. Be yourself. That's your greatest advantage. Those words centered me, reminding me that this pitch wasn't about competing with Victor on his terms. It was about offering something fundamentally different than what he represented. The next morning, our team arrived at the Meridian Group headquarters 30 minutes early, professionally dressed, but not in the identical dark suits that characterized most agency presentations. We represented diversity of thought, approach, and background, exactly what we offered clients. We were scheduled to present last, after both established agencies had made their pitches. As we waited in the reception area, I caught a glimpse of Victor exiting the conference room, looking confident in his bespoke suit, shaking hands with board members. He didn't notice me at first, engaged in conversation with the committee chair. When he finally turned and saw me sitting there with my team, his expression shifted from confusion to disbelief to something approaching anger. He recovered quickly, smoothing his features into professional neutrality as he approached. "Sophia," he said, his voice carefully modulated. "This is unexpected. I wasn't aware you had established enough of a presence to be pitching accounts of this caliber." I stood, extending my hand professionally. "It's good to see you, Victor. Authentic Impact is relatively new, but our team's expertise is well established." He shook my hand briefly, his grip slightly too firm. "Indeed. Well, best of luck, though I think you'll find that organizations of this size typically prefer agencies with proven track records and established industry relationships." Before I could respond, the committee chair called us in. As we gathered our materials, Victor leaned closer, speaking quietly so only I could hear. "Remember, this industry runs on connections, Sophia. Always has, always will." I smiled, genuine rather than defensive. "You're right, Victor. It absolutely does. Just not the kind you're thinking of." The conference room was imposing, a long mahogany table surrounded by serious-faced executives, presentation screen at the ready, water glasses at each place setting. I recognized the choreography of high-stakes business presentations, having participated in dozens while at Sheldon Digital. The difference was that now I wasn't supporting someone else's performance. I was leading my own. "Thank you for the opportunity to present today," I began, making eye contact with each board member. "We understand you've just heard from two excellent established agencies. Rather than covering the same ground, I'd like to start by explaining what makes Authentic Impact fundamentally different in our approach to sustainability marketing." For the next 45 minutes, our team presented not just our capabilities, but our philosophy. The belief that effective marketing for ethical businesses required authentic partnership rather than traditional agency-client dynamics. We shared case studies from our initial clients, demonstrated our transparent reporting tools, and outlined our collaborative process that kept clients involved at every stage. Most importantly, we presented a specific strategy for the Meridian Group, not a generic approach to sustainability marketing, but a detailed analysis of how each member company could leverage their unique sustainability practices to create market differentiation while contributing to the collective impact of the consortium. When we concluded, the room was quiet for a moment before the questions began. Thoughtful, probing queries about our process, our capacity, our experience. We answered honestly, acknowledging our size and newness while emphasizing the depth of expertise our team brought from our previous roles. The final question came from the committee chair, a woman whose penetrating gaze had remained evaluative throughout our presentation. Ms. Martinez, you've presented a compelling alternative to the traditional agency model. But why should we trust our initiative to a firm that's existed for just a few months when we have options with decades of proven success? I paused, considering my response carefully. This wasn't just about winning a client. It was about articulating the value proposition that defined Authentic Impact. The traditional agency model was designed for a different era, I said finally. One where expertise was scarce, information was controlled, and consumers accepted messages at face value. That world no longer exists. Today's consumers can instantly verify claims, research alternatives, and share experiences globally. Moved closer to the table, making eye contact with each committee member. The challenge isn't creating clever messaging. It's ensuring that your marketing authentically reflects your actual values and practices. That requires a partner who approaches sustainability not as a market trend to exploit, but as a fundamental business philosophy. I gestured to my team. Every person at Authentic Impact has chosen to work specifically with organizations committed to ethical practices. We've built our entire agency around transparency, collaboration, and measurable impact. We don't just talk about these values in pitch meetings. We've structured our business model around them. I took a breath, then concluded. You don't need an agency with decades of history. You need a partner whose future is aligned with yours. That's what Authentic Impact offers, not just our expertise, but our commitment to the same vision of business as a force for positive change. The room was silent for a moment before the committee chair nodded, a slight smile breaking her serious expression. Thank you for your candor, Ms. Martinez. That's precisely the question we've been wrestling with internally. We were thanked for our time, told that the committee would make their decision within the week, and escorted back to the reception area. As we gathered our materials, I felt a curious mixture of emotions: pride in our presentation, anxiety about the outcome, but most of all, a profound sense of having articulated something authentic about who we were and what we valued. That, Natalie said as we stepped into the elevator, was masterful. Regardless of the outcome, we just defined who we are and why we exist. And we did it by being completely honest, Rebecca added. No exaggeration, no false promises, no manufactured urgency. Jason smiled broadly as the elevator doors closed. Did you see their faces when we demonstrated the real-time reporting dashboard? They've never had that level of transparency from an agency before. As we drove back to our office, discussing the presentation and planning next steps regardless of the outcome, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Impressive presentation. We clearly taught you well. May the best agency win. VS. I showed it to my team without comment. Rebecca rolled her eyes. Still taking credit for your talent. Some things never change. Actually, I replied, putting my phone away. Some things do change. 5 months ago, that message would have undermined my confidence, made me question my right to be in that room. Today, it just confirms we're on the right path. We returned to the Breakwater building, to our modest office with its mismatched furniture and abundant natural light, reinvigorated rather than drained by the high-stakes presentation. Whatever the outcome, we had stood for our values, presented our authentic vision, and challenged the industry norms that Victor represented. 3 days later, the committee chair called. Authentic Impact had been selected as the marketing partner for the Meridian Group's sustainability initiative. Your approach aligned with our values, she explained. We're not just looking for marketing expertise. We're looking for a true partner in communicating our commitment to sustainable business practices. Your team demonstrated both the capability and the authentic understanding we need. When I shared the news with my team, the celebration was jubilant, but also deeply validating. We hadn't just won a significant client. We had proven that our vision of a different kind of agency relationship was viable in the real world of business decisions. That evening, as we shared champagne in our office, proper glasses from Natalie, paper cups for the rest of us, I received another text from Victor. "Congratulations! Beginner's luck is a powerful thing. When they need real results, they'll reconsider." I didn't respond. There was no need. The work ahead would speak for itself. The Meridian Group contract transformed Authentic Impact virtually overnight. Not just financially, though the six-figure project certainly stabilized our fledgling agency, but in terms of visibility and credibility within the industry. Suddenly, we weren't just an interesting startup. We were the firm that had beaten Sheldon Digital for a major sustainability initiative. The first strategy meeting with the Meridian board made it clear why they'd chosen us. As we walked through our proposed approach, creating distinct but interconnected campaigns for each member company while building a collective narrative about sustainable business practices, the committee chair, Elena Thornton, nodded appreciatively. "This is exactly what was missing from the other presentations," she said during a discussion of messaging frameworks. They proposed marketing sustainability as if it were any other selling point. You understand that authentic sustainability isn't just what these companies do, it's who they are. That insight defined our work over the next several months. We didn't just create campaigns. We helped each Meridian company articulate their unique sustainability story, connecting their specific practices to their core values and market positioning. The results began to show almost immediately: increased engagement, positive media coverage, and most importantly, growing consumer preference for Meridian companies over competitors. Our office in the Breakwater building evolved from a sparse collection of secondhand furniture to a fully functioning agency space. We added 3 new team members: Maya Patel, a social media strategist who specialized in cause-driven campaigns; Tyler Robinson, a content developer with a background in environmental journalism; and Zoe Washington, Daniel's niece, who joined as our project coordinator fresh out of college. We maintained our commitment to transparency, developing systems that gave clients unprecedented visibility into our processes and performance metrics. We structured our contracts to align our success with client results rather than billable hours or retainer fees. We created collaborative workshops instead of traditional presentations, involving clients in strategy development rather than simply presenting finished concepts for approval. Everything we built represented a direct challenge to the traditional agency model that Victor had embodied. The mystification of marketing expertise, the deliberate distancing of clients from creative processes, the prioritization of agency, convenience over client participation. As our reputation grew, so did interest from other sustainability-focused businesses. By our 6th month, we had expanded to 11 team members and a client roster that included renewable energy startups, ethical fashion brands, and community development organizations. We weren't just surviving. We were thriving in a specific niche that aligned perfectly with our values and expertise. Through industry channels, I heard occasional updates about Sheldon Digital. Victor had hired 2 new executives from major agencies, expanded their downtown office space, and launched a division focused on corporate responsibility communications, clearly a response to losing the Meridian account. In press releases, he positioned this move as visionary leadership rather than a reaction to changing market demands. I paid attention to these developments, but remained focused on building authentic impact. Victor's approach to business, his emphasis on hierarchy, control, and personal recognition, had shaped me by showing exactly what I didn't want to become. I had no interest in replicating his patterns, even in pursuit of success. 8 months after our launch, the Coastal Brands Expo announced their speaker lineup for the annual industry conference. My name appeared on the list, leading a panel discussion titled Authentic Communication in the Sustainability Space. It was my first major speaking opportunity, a chance to share our approach with the broader marketing community. 2 days. After the announcement, I received a LinkedIn message from Margaret Williams, the content director Victor had hired to replace me. Congratulations on the Coastal Brands panel. Victor mentioned you might be speaking. Perhaps we could grab coffee. At the conference? I'd love to hear about your experience building an agency from scratch. The message seemed innocuous, friendly even, but something about the phrasing, Victor mentioned you might be speaking, struck me as odd. The speaker lineup had been publicly announced. Why would Victor be discussing my speaking engagement with Margaret? I shared the message with Natalie during our morning coffee ritual at the office. Her eyes narrowed as she read it. This feels like reconnaissance, she said, handing back my phone. Victor's never shown interest in anyone else's success unless he can leverage it somehow. You think he's having Margaret gather intelligence? I think Victor is incapable of seeing your success as anything but a threat to his narrative. He built his reputation on being the indispensable connection maker, the gatekeeper to opportunity. You've proven that model wrong, and that undermines his entire value proposition. I considered this perspective, remembering Victor's parting words about the industry running on connections. So what would he gain from having Margaret connect with me? Natalie shrugged. Information about your approach, your client strategies, your growth plans. Or maybe just the satisfaction of feeling like he still has some connection to your success. I composed a polite but non-committal response to Margaret, thanking her for reaching out but explaining that my conference schedule was already quite full, professional, cordial, but establishing a clear boundary. As the conference approached, I focused on preparing for my panel. The topic, authentic communication in sustainability marketing, was perfectly aligned with Authentic Impact's mission, but speaking to a room full of industry peers brought a different kind of pressure than client presentations. These wouldn't be potential clients evaluating our approach, they would be fellow professionals judging our credibility. The Coastal Brands Expo was held at the Edison Hotel, one of Lakeside Harbor's grand old establishments, recently renovated, to balance historical charm with modern amenities. I arrived early on the first day, collecting my speaker badge and orientation materials, familiarizing myself with the venue layout. The main exhibition hall buzzed with activity as companies set up elaborate booths showcasing their services and products. As I reviewed the final conference program over coffee in the hotel restaurant, a voice I immediately recognized spoke from behind me. Sophia Martinez. I thought I recognized that profile. I turned to find Victor standing there, impeccably. Dressed as always, conference badge identifying him as both an attendee and a speaker. I hadn't realized he would be presenting as well. Victor, I said, rising to shake his hand professionally. Good to see you. Are you speaking at the conference? Tomorrow afternoon, he replied with a satisfied smile. Keynote address on building agency relationships that last. The organizers were quite insistent. Of course they were. Despite our success with the Meridian Group and growing reputation in sustainability marketing, Victor remained a significant industry figure. With decades of connections and influence, congratulations, I said sincerely. That's a significant platform. Indeed. He glanced at my speaker badge. I see you're doing a panel discussion, moving from execution to thought leadership. Quite a rapid ascent. The comment was framed as a compliment, but carried the subtle implication that I had somehow skipped necessary steps, that my current position was premature rather than earned. The panel aligns perfectly with our focus at Authentic Impact, I replied, choosing not to engage with the implied criticism. Sustainability marketing requires genuine alignment between values and communication. It's an approach that's resonating strongly with clients. Victor's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of something, annoyance, concern, crossing his features before his professional smile returned. Yes, I've heard about your initial success. Quite impressive for a new agency. though sustainability remains a relatively niche market. Limited growth potential compared to broader sectors. This was classic Victor, acknowledging accomplishment while simultaneously minimizing its significance. 8 months ago, this subtle undermining would have triggered self-doubt. Now, it simply clarified how fundamentally different our perspectives were. Actually, sustainability is the fastest-growing segment in consumer preference across multiple industries, I countered calmly. Companies are increasingly recognizing that authentic environmental and social responsibility isn't just ethical, it's a market differentiator. Victor waved his hand dismissively. Trends come and go, Sophia. I've seen dozens in my career. The fundamentals of agency business remain constant. Client relationships built on established reputation and strategic connections. I smiled, genuinely amused by his insistence on this perspective, despite mounting evidence to the contrary. I suppose that's where we differ. Authentic impact is built on the belief that relationships should be based on collaborative value creation, not dependency or gatekeeping. His expression hardened slightly, the professional veneer thinning. Idealism is charming in startups. Reality tends to assert itself eventually. Perhaps, I agreed, gathering my materials. Or perhaps the reality of what clients truly value is simply changing. Either way, I look forward to hearing your keynote tomorrow. If you'll excuse me, I need to prepare for my panel. As I walked away, I felt Victor's gaze following me. Not angry exactly, but calculating, assessing. In that moment, I realized that our success wasn't just a professional achievement. It represented a direct challenge to his understanding of how the industry functioned, how value was created, how relationships were structured. My panel discussion that afternoon exceeded my expectations. The room was full, standing room only in fact, with marketing professionals from across the industry spectrum, not just those focused on sustainability. The moderator, a respected industry journalist, opened with a pointed observation. Traditional. Agencies are suddenly discovering sustainability as a market segment, but Authentic Impact has approached it as a fundamental business philosophy from day one. Tell us how that shapes your client relationships. For the next hour, I shared our approach, our successes, and even our challenges with complete transparency. I explained how aligning agency incentives with client outcomes created more productive partnerships, how involving clients in strategy development led to more effective campaigns, how authentic communication required genuine values alignment, rather than superficial messaging. The audience response was overwhelmingly positive. The Q&A session ran over time, with attendees asking thoughtful questions about implementation, measurement, and scalability. Several people approached me afterward to exchange contact information, including potential clients and possible collaborators. As the room finally began to clear, I noticed Margaret Williams lingering near the door, watching me thoughtfully. She approached as I gathered my notes. "That was surprisingly substantive," she said, her tone more respectful than her words. "Most agency panels are just thinly disguised sales pitches." "Thank you," I replied, genuinely appreciative of the candid assessment. What's happening in sustainability marketing deserves serious discussion, not just promotional talking points. She hesitated, then asked, "Do you have time for that coffee now? There's something I'd like to discuss." Curiosity overcame my initial caution. "Sure. The cafe downstairs should be quieter now that the afternoon sessions have started." As we found a corner table in the hotel cafe, I noticed a shift in Margaret's demeanor. Less the confident executive Victor had hired to replace me, more someone wrestling with professional questions. She waited until our coffee arrived before speaking. "I'll be direct, Sophia. The sustainability division at Sheldon Digital isn't gaining traction the way Victor projected. We're securing meetings based on the agency's reputation, but we're not winning accounts." This was surprising news. Victor had been aggressively promoting their sustainability capabilities in industry publications. What's happening in the pitches? I asked. Margaret sighed, stirring her coffee absently. We present solid strategic frameworks, comprehensive capabilities, impressive case studies from adjacent sectors. The prospects seem interested. Ask good questions then. Choose smaller specialized agencies, often ones with far less experience and resources than Sheldon Digital. Including authentic impact, I suggested. She nodded reluctantly. In 3 recent situations. Victor insists it's because these clients don't understand the value of an established agency partnership, that they're making emotional decisions rather than strategic ones. I considered this assessment, recognizing Victor's perspective immediately. In his worldview, clients chose Sheldon Digital for rational reasons: expertise, reputation, track record, and chose alternatives only for irrational ones: emotion, trendiness, personal connections. What do you think is happening? I asked. Margaret looked startled by the question, as if no one had asked for her assessment before. I think, she began, then paused, gathering her thoughts. I think these sustainability-focused companies want partners who genuinely share their values, not just agencies that see them as an emerging market segment. They're choosing authentic alignment over established reputation. The insight was remarkably accurate and completely at odds with Victor's understanding of client decision-making. That aligns with our experience, I acknowledged. These clients aren't making emotional decisions. They're making deeply rational, ones based on different criteria than traditional agency selection. Margaret nodded slowly. Your panel today clarified something I've been sensing but couldn't articulate. Victor keeps positioning our sustainability division as an expansion of services, but it's really a fundamentally different approach to client relationships. It requires different structures, different incentives, different measures of success, I agreed. It's difficult to graft that onto an existing agency model built around different priorities. She studied me for a long moment. You know, when Victor hired me, he described you as someone with good tactical skills but limited leadership potential. After seeing your panel and the response to it, I have to wonder what else he's misjudged. The comment wasn't a question, but it created an opening for one. Why are you telling me this, Margaret? I doubt Victor would approve of this conversation. She smiled ruefully. Probably not. But I've spent my career in traditional agencies, moving up by following established playbooks. What you're building at Authentic Impact, the transparency, the collaboration, the genuine alignment with client values. It's not just a different service offering. It's a different model of what an agency can be. I waited, sensing there was more she wanted to say. I joined Sheldon Digital because Victor promised I'd have autonomy to build something significant, she continued. But I'm realizing that autonomy means implementing his vision, not developing my own. And his vision is increasingly out of step with where the industry is heading. The implication hung between us, unspoken but clear. Margaret was considering her options beyond Sheldon Digital. The industry is evolving, I said carefully. Client expectations are changing. New models are emerging that prioritize different values. Like Authentic Impact, she suggested. I nodded, then added, and other agencies that are reimagining the client relationship as partnership rather than service provision. The shift isn't limited to sustainability marketing, though that sector is leading the change. Our conversation continued for another half hour, touching on industry trends, changing client expectations, and the challenges of building new organizational models. I shared honestly about the difficulties we'd faced in launching Authentic Impact, the steep learning curve of running an agency, rather than just leading creative work. Margaret offered insights from her extensive experience with larger clients and more complex campaigns. By the time we parted, something had shifted in our dynamic. The initial wariness had transformed into professional respect, even a tentative collegiality. She wasn't an adversary or a spy for Victor. She was a talented professional asking fundamental questions about her career path and the future of the industry we both inhabited. "Thank you for your candor," she said as we prepared to rejoin the conference. "It's refreshing after months of carefully managed messaging." "That's actually our entire business model," I replied with a smile. "Authentic communication is surprisingly effective." "I'm beginning to understand why," she acknowledged. Then more seriously, "Victor's keynote tomorrow positions traditional agency relationships as the gold standard in our industry. After our conversation, I'm finding it increasingly difficult to support that narrative." I chose my words carefully, aware of her conflicted position. "The most valuable thing you can offer your team and your clients is your honest assessment of what creates effective partnerships. Whether that aligns with Victor's perspective or not, your authentic viewpoint matters." She nodded thoughtfully, then offered her hand. "I suspect we'll be seeing more of each other as the industry continues to evolve." As Margaret walked away, I reflected on how dramatically my perspective had changed in just 8 months. When I left Sheldon Digital, I had viewed Victor primarily as an individual who had taken credit for my work, undermined my confidence, and dismissed my potential. Now I understood that he represented an entire approach to agency-client relationships. One, based on asymmetric information, manufactured expertise, and deliberate dependency. Authentic impact wasn't just a vehicle for my professional advancement. It was a challenge to that fundamental model. And our success wasn't just vindicating my personal capabilities. It was validating a different vision of what marketing partnerships could be. Victor's keynote the following day proved enlightening, though not in the way he likely intended. Speaking to a packed ballroom of industry professionals, he expounded on the value of established agency relationships, the importance of proven methodologies, and the risks of entrusting brand communication to untested approaches or niche specialists. While he never mentioned authentic impact directly, the subtext was clear in references to trendy sustainability startups and idealistic but unsustainable business models. He presented the traditional agency structure as the culmination of decades of industry evolution, optimized for client success rather than a model that primarily served agency interests. What struck me most, however, wasn't Victor's defense of established practices, but the response of the audience. Where such presentations had once been received with unquestioning acceptance, I now observed skeptical expressions, whispered side conversations, and pointed questions during the Q&A. "How do you respond to clients seeking more collaborative relationships with their agencies?" asked one attendee. "What about the growing demand for transparency in agency processes and performance metrics?" inquired another. "Many clients are prioritizing authentic values, alignment over agency size or history. How is Sheldon Digital adapting to this shift?" challenged a third. Victor handled these questions with practiced skill, reframing challenges as opportunities, positioning Sheldon Digital as evolving while maintaining proven fundamentals. He was polished, articulate, confident, all the qualities that had once convinced me he possessed superior wisdom about our industry. Yet, watching from the audience, I now recognized the careful deflections, the subtle redirections, the way he answered adjacent questions rather than addressing direct challenges. His performance was masterful but increasingly transparent to an audience growing more sophisticated in its assessment of authentic communication. After the keynote, the conference corridors buzzed with discussions about the changing agency landscape, the evolution of client expectations, the emergence of new models that prioritized collaboration over hierarchy, transparency over mystification. I participated in these conversations when invited but primarily observed, noting how the narrative was shifting even among traditional agency professionals. That evening, the conference hosted a networking reception in the Edison Hotel's Grand I ballroom. As I circulated through the crowd, engaging in discussions with fellow attendees, I was approached by a woman I didn't immediately recognize. "Ms. Martinez?" she said, extending her hand. "Diane Foster, CMO at Evergreen Consumer Brands. I attended your panel yesterday and found your perspective on authentic sustainability communication fascinating." I recognized the company name. Immediately, Evergreen was a major player in the consumer products space, with dozens of brands across multiple categories. They had recently announced a significant sustainability initiative, committing to plastic-free packaging by 2030. "Thank you," I replied, genuinely pleased by the feedback. Sustainability communication requires a different approach than traditional brand marketing. The stakes and standards are higher. "Precisely what we're discovering," she agreed. "We've made substantial commitments to environmental responsibility, but our messaging isn't resonating as authentically as the actual work deserves." "That's a common challenge," I acknowledged. "Sustainability initiatives often develop separately from marketing functions, creating a disconnect between actions and communications." Diane nodded emphatically. "Exactly our situation. Our sustainability team is doing groundbreaking work, but our marketing approach feels conventional by comparison. We're not capturing the genuine innovation happening within the company." The conversation continued, shifting from general observations to specific challenges Evergreen was facing in communicating their sustainability journey. Diane asked thoughtful questions about our approach at Authentic Impact, particularly our collaborative methodology and transparency frameworks. "We're actually reviewing our agency relationships next quarter," she mentioned as our discussion neared its conclusion. "I'd be very interested in learning more about how Authentic Impact might approach our sustainability communication challenges." She handed me her card. Not a perfunctory exchange, but a deliberate invitation. "Let's schedule a conversation when we're both back in Lakeside Harbor. I think there might be meaningful alignment between your approach and what we're trying to achieve." As Diane moved on to other conversations, I felt a presence beside me. Victor had approached silently, champagne flute in hand, observing my interaction with the Evergreen CMO. "Making new connections, I see," he said, his tone casual but his gaze intent. "Diane Foster is a significant player in the industry." "We had an interesting conversation about authentic sustainability communication," I replied, neither concealing nor emphasizing the potential opportunity. Victor smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Evergreen is a major account. Their marketing budget exceeds most agencies' entire revenue. Quite ambitious for a startup to approach." "Actually, she approached me after attending my panel," I corrected gently. "She found our perspective on authentic communication compelling." His expression flickered briefly before resettling into practiced cordiality. "Perspective is one thing. Capability is another. Accounts of that size require substantial resources, established processes, experienced leadership. Or perhaps new challenges require new approaches," I suggested, "especially in areas where traditional methods aren't delivering the desired results." Victor studied me for a moment, then said with sudden directness, "You know, I underestimated you, Sophia. Not your talent. I always recognize that. But your ambition, your willingness to reject established wisdom and chart your own course. Those qualities are rarer than I appreciated." The statement was the closest thing to an acknowledgement of my capabilities that Victor had ever offered. Yet even framed as a compliment, it contained an implicit criticism. That ambition and independence were somehow surprising in someone he had mentored. That rejecting established wisdom, his wisdom, was a deviation rather than a legitimate choice. "Thank you, Victor," I replied, choosing to accept the acknowledgement at face value. Though I don't see it as rejecting established wisdom so much as questioning whether what worked in previous decades still serves clients effectively today. He nodded slowly, swirling his champagne without drinking it. "The industry is certainly evolving. Though in my experience, those who proclaim the loudest that everything has changed are often trying to compensate for limited experience or resources. There it was again, the subtle undermining, the implication that new approaches were merely covers for inadequacy rather than legitimate innovations. It was so characteristic of Victor that I found myself smiling slightly. "What's amusing?" he asked, a defensive edge creeping into his voice. "Just appreciating how consistent your perspective has remained," I replied honestly. "You've always believed that established structures exist because they're optimal, rather than considering that they might persist primarily because they benefit those who created them." Victor's expression hardened momentarily before he regained his composure. "An interesting philosophy. Time will tell which approach proves more sustainable. The market tends to be the ultimate arbiter of such questions." "On that, we completely agree," I said, raising my glass slightly in acknowledgement. As Victor moved away to join another conversation, I realized that our brief exchange had fundamentally shifted our dynamic. For the first time, he had engaged with me as a competitor rather than a former employee, someone whose approach challenged his own rather than someone whose talent he had cultivated. The change was subtle but significant, marking a transition in how he perceived both me and Authentic Impact. The remainder of the conference unfolded with a series of productive conversations, panel discussions, and workshop sessions. I connected with potential clients, possible collaborators, and even prospective team members as word spread about Authentic Impact's approach and early successes. Our focus on sustainability marketing and authentic communication positioned us perfectly within the evolving industry landscape, where traditional approaches were increasingly questioned and new models sought. By the final day, it was clear that something fundamental had shifted, not just for me personally or for Authentic Impact as an agency, but for the industry as a whole. The conversations happening in session rooms and hallways, over coffee and during receptions, repeatedly centered on themes of authenticity, transparency, and genuine partnership rather than traditional agency service models. As I packed my materials and prepared to check out of the hotel, I received a text from Uncle Frank. "How was the conference? Did you find your voice in that crowd of professional talkers?" I smiled at his characteristically direct question. "I did," I texted back, and discovered that many others are asking the same questions we've been exploring at Authentic Impact. The industry is ready for change. His response came quickly. "No surprise there. When someone demonstrates a better way, people notice. Especially those who felt constrained by the old ways, but couldn't articulate an alternative. You're not just building an agency, Sophia. You're helping define the future of your industry." As I left the Edison Hotel and drove back toward the Breakwater building, I reflected on how dramatically my professional journey had evolved in less than a year. What had begun as a response to betrayal, Victor's dismissal of my potential, and appropriation of my work, had grown into something far more significant, a vision for a different kind of agency relationship, a model that challenged industry assumptions about how value was created and shared. The conference had confirmed what our client successes had suggested, that Authentic Impact wasn't just a viable alternative to traditional agencies, but potentially the vanguard of where the entire industry was heading. Victor had insisted that the marketing world ran on connections, but he had fundamentally misunderstood what kind of connections truly mattered in the emerging landscape. Authentic alignment between actions and communications, genuine partnership between agencies and clients. Transparent connection between work and results. As I pulled into the parking area beside the Breakwater building, I noticed Natalie waiting near the entrance, clearly eager for a conference update. Her expression brightened as I approached with my suitcase. "Well?" she asked immediately. "How was it? Did Victor behave himself?" I laughed, appreciating her direct approach. It was illuminating in ways I hadn't expected. And Victor was Victor. though with a new awareness that we represent an actual challenge to his model, not just a temporary anomaly. "That's progress," she observed as we entered the building. "So, what's next for the industry revolutionaries?" I smiled at the gentle teasing while considering the question seriously. Evergreen Consumer Brands has expressed interest in our approach to sustainability communication. Their CMO wants to meet when we're both back in Lakeside Harbor. Natalie stopped walking, turning to face me with widened eyes. "Evergreen, that would be transformative for us. Their sustainability initiative is one of the most ambitious in the consumer products sector. It would require us to scale quickly," I acknowledged, "to develop new capabilities, possibly bring on additional team members. But aligned with exactly the kind of work we want to be doing," she countered, excitement building in her voice. Authentic sustainability communication at a scale that could influence entire markets. As we continued toward our office, discussing implications and possibilities, I felt a sense of clarity about the path ahead. Authentic impact had emerged from a personal and professional betrayal, but it had evolved into something far more significant than a response to Victor's limitations. It had become a vehicle for genuine innovation in how marketing partnerships could function, how value could be created, how authentic communication could drive both business success and positive change. The industry connections that truly mattered weren't the ones Victor had cultivated through decades of hierarchy and gatekeeping. They were the connections we were building daily, with clients who shared our values, with team members who contributed their unique talents to a collaborative vision, with an evolving industry ready for new models of partnership and value creation. Victor had insisted I would never succeed without his connections. What he hadn't understood, what I was only now fully grasping myself, was that his kind of connections were becoming increasingly less relevant in an industry where authenticity, transparency, and genuine alignment were the new currencies of success. The future didn't belong to those who controlled access to opportunity. It belonged to those who created new opportunities through authentic value and genuine partnership. And Authentic Impact was positioned perfectly to help define that future, one client relationship at a time. The meeting with Diane Foster and her team at Evergreen Consumer Brands took place 3 weeks after the Coastal Brands Expo. We convened in their corporate headquarters, a sleek building of glass and sustainable materials overlooking the harbor. Their top-floor conference room offered panoramic views of the water, a fitting backdrop for discussions about environmental responsibility. Evergreen's situation was more complex than I'd initially understood. Their sustainability initiative wasn't just ambitious, it was revolutionary for their industry segment. Their commitment to plastic-free packaging by 2030 would require fundamental redesigns of dozens of product lines, new materials sourcing, manufacturing process overhauls, and significant consumer education. "Our challenge isn't implementation," Diane explained as her sustainability director presented detailed timelines and technical specifications. "Our engineers and product teams are making remarkable progress. The challenge is communication, helping consumers understand why these changes matter, how they impact product experience, and why they might justify premium pricing in some categories." I noticed a fundamental disconnect in their existing marketing materials. While their sustainability work was innovative and authentically purpose-driven, their communication approach remained conventional, focusing on product attributes rather than values alignment, emphasizing corporate commitments rather than shared consumer company journeys. "You're treating sustainability as a feature rather than a core value," I observed after reviewing their current campaigns. Consumers who prioritize environmental responsibility don't see it as an added benefit. They see it as a fundamental requirement, a reflection of their own values. Diane's expression shifted from polite interest to genuine engagement. "That's exactly what's missing in our current approach. We're communicating sustainability as something we're doing, not something we are." The conversation deepened from there, exploring how authentic sustainability communication required a different framework than traditional product marketing. We discussed transparency about progress versus perfection, engaging consumers as partners rather than passive recipients of messaging, and creating communications that respected the intelligence and genuine concerns of environmentally conscious customers. What would an authentic impact approach look like for Evergreen? Diane asked directly. Not just conceptually, but practically. How would you approach our specific challenges? Rather than presenting a prepared pitch, I engaged her team in a collaborative discussion, asking questions about their current processes, internal challenges, and measures of success. This approach, treating the initial meeting as a working session rather than a sales presentation, visibly surprised but then increasingly engaged the Evergreen team. By the end of our 3-hour meeting, we had outlined a potential framework for transforming their sustainability communication, not just messaging, but the entire process by which they developed, implemented, and measured their marketing efforts. This is refreshingly different, Diane said as we concluded. Most agencies come in with polished presentations of work they've done for other clients. You came in with questions and a collaborative process. That's actually central to our approach, I explained. We believe effective sustainability communication can't be imported or imposed. It has to emerge from the authentic intersection of your company's values, capabilities, and customer relationships. As Natalie and I left the Evergreen headquarters, we both recognized the significance of what had just occurred. A major consumer brands company was seriously considering a partnership with our 9-month-old agency for a transformative initiative. The opportunity was enormous, and so were the implications for Authentic Impact's growth and evolution. If we secure this account, we'll need to expand significantly, Natalie observed as we walked to the parking garage. Not just team size, but capabilities, processes, maybe even office space. And we'd need to do it while maintaining our core approach, I added. Scaling rapidly without compromising the collaborative model that makes us effective. The drive back to the Breakwater building became a strategy session, exploring how we might grow while preserving what made Authentic Impact unique. By the time we reached our office, we had the outline of a plan for potential expansion, one that would require investment but would position us to handle accounts of Evergreen's scale without sacrificing our fundamental values. I called an all-hands meeting for the following morning to discuss this potential opportunity and its implications. Our team had grown to 14 people, still small by traditional agency standards, but a significant evolution from our initial 4-person operation. As we gathered in our main workspace, I shared the highlights of the Evergreen meeting and the scale of the opportunity it represented. This would transform Authentic Impact, I acknowledged, looking around at the team we'd built. It would require us to grow faster than we'd planned, to develop new capabilities, potentially to restructure some of our processes. But without compromising our approach, Natalie added firmly. That's non-negotiable. Exactly, I agreed. Which raises important questions for all of us. Are we ready for this kind of growth? Do we want this kind of opportunity at this stage of our development? How might it change what we're building here? What followed was one of the most honest and productive discussions in our agency's young history. Team members raised legitimate concerns about maintaining our collaborative culture during rapid expansion, about the challenges of onboarding new colleagues quickly, about the risk of diluting our distinctive approach as we grew. Traditional. Agencies expand by adding layers of management, creating hierarchies that separate decision-makers from creative teams, Rebecca observed. We need a different model if we want to maintain genuine collaboration at scale. And we need to be transparent with Evergreen about our growth process, added Jason. If they choose us, they're choosing a partner who will be evolving alongside their initiative. By the end of our 2-hour discussion, we had reached collective clarity. We would pursue the Evergreen opportunity authentically, being honest about our current scale while demonstrating our capacity for growth, presenting a realistic expansion plan rather than pretending we already had all necessary resources in place. Most importantly, we would only move forward if Evergreen understood and valued our collaborative approach. If they were simply seeking a smaller, less expensive version of a traditional agency, we wouldn't be the right partner, regardless of the opportunity's size. 2 days later, I received a call from Diane Foster. "We'd like to continue the conversation," she said. "Your approach aligns with what we're trying to achieve with our sustainability initiative, but we do have questions about your capacity to handle an account of our scale." "That's a legitimate concern," I acknowledged. "We'd need to grow to serve Evergreen effectively. I'd like to share our expansion plan and discuss how we might scale together through this initiative." Rather than a conventional pitch presentation, we proposed a half-day working session to explore how authentic impact might grow alongside Evergreen's sustainability communication needs. Diane agreed readily, appreciating the transparency and collaborative approach. The working session took place the following week, with key stakeholders from both organizations participating. We presented our growth strategy openly, how we would add specific capabilities, how we would maintain our collaborative approach at larger scale, how we would ensure consistent quality during expansion. "What's remarkable," observed Evergreen's operations director, "is that you're approaching agency growth the same way you approach client work, with transparency, collaborative planning, and authentic communication about both strengths and challenges." "It's the only way we know how to work," I replied simply. "We can't advocate for authentic communication with consumers while practicing something different in our own operations." The session evolved into a genuine strategic planning exercise, with Evergreen executives contributing insights about their needs and expectations, while our team outlined how we would build capacity to meet them. By the end, something unexpected had emerged. Not just a potential client-agency relationship, but a true partnership in which both organizations would evolve together. "This isn't how agency selections typically work," Diane acknowledged as we concluded. "But then again, this sustainability initiative isn't a typical marketing challenge. It requires a different approach." 1 week later, Evergreen officially selected Authentic Impact as their sustainability communications partner. The contract would more than double our agency's revenue, requiring us to expand from 14 to approximately 25 team members over the next 6 months. The news sent ripples through the industry, with marketing publications noting the surprising selection of our young agency over established firms with decades of experience. The announcement coincided with the annual Marketing Excellence Awards ceremony held at the Grand Ballroom of the Marina District Cultural Center. Sheldon Digital had been nominated for several awards, including Best Sustainability Campaign for a regional energy company, a client they had secured after creating their sustainability division. I had not planned to attend the ceremony. We hadn't been in operation long enough to qualify for most award categories. But Diane Foster insisted that I accompany the Evergreen team as they were receiving recognition for their corporate sustainability leadership. The event embodied the traditional industry culture: glamorous venue, formal attire, carefully orchestrated networking opportunities where agency executives cultivated relationships with potential clients. As I entered with the Evergreen team, I felt a curious detachment from the performative aspects of the evening, the ways in which these events reinforced conventional agency-client dynamics. The ceremony was already underway when we found our table, with minor awards being presented, before building to the more prestigious categories. I noticed Victor at a prominent table near the stage, surrounded by Sheldon Digital executives and key clients. He embodied confident authority in his perfectly tailored tuxedo, the very picture of established agency leadership. During a break, between award presentations, I excused myself to visit the refreshment area. As I waited for a glass of water, a voice spoke from beside me. "Congratulations on the Evergreen account. That's quite an achievement for an agency your size." I turned to find Margaret Williams, looking elegant in a deep blue evening gown, her expression thoughtful rather than confrontational. "Thank you," I replied, It's an exciting opportunity and a significant responsibility. I imagine Victor was surprised by the announcement, she said, a question embedded in the observation. I smiled slightly. I haven't had that conversation with him, but I suspect he views it as an anomaly rather than a trend. Margaret shook her head. That's his limitation. He can only see the industry through the lens that made him successful decades ago. He doesn't recognize how fundamentally client expectations are changing. She glanced around to ensure our conversation remained private, then continued more quietly. I've given notice at Sheldon Digital. Next month will be my last. The news surprised me, though perhaps it shouldn't have after our conversation at the conference. May I ask what prompted your decision? Many factors, she said carefully. But primarily the recognition that Victor's vision for the agency, and for my role within it, doesn't align with where I believe the industry is heading. The sustainability division isn't gaining traction because we're approaching it as a market segment rather than a value set. I nodded, understanding completely. Have you decided what's next for you? I'm exploring options, she replied, including the possibility of building something that aligns more authentically with my own professional values. Your journey with authentic impact has been instructive in that regard. Before I could respond, the ceremony resumed, calling us back to our respective tables. As I returned to the Evergreen Group, I reflected on Margaret's news. Her departure from Sheldon Digital wasn't just about individual career choice. It represented a broader shift in how industry professionals viewed traditional agency structures and leadership approaches. The remainder of the awards ceremony unfolded predictably until the final major category, Agency Innovation of the Year. This award recognized significant contributions to evolving agency practice or client relationships. Traditionally, it went to technological innovations or novel service offerings from established firms. The nominees for Agency Innovation of the Year are, announced the presenter, reading from the envelope, Horizon Media for their AI-powered content optimization platform, Sheldon Digital for their integrated sustainability division, and Authentic Impact for their transparent collaboration model. I froze in shock. We hadn't submitted an entry for this category, or any category. We weren't even eligible as a new agency with less than a year in operation. Diane leaned over, whispering, I may have submitted a client-side nomination describing your approach. The committee apparently found it compelling enough to include. Before I could process this information, the presenter was opening the results. Envelope. And the winner is Authentic Impact for their transparent collaboration model, reimagining the agency-client relationship for today's marketing challenges. The Evergreen team erupted in applause, urging me toward the stage. In a daze, I made my way to the podium, acutely aware of the industry leaders watching this unexpected development, including Victor, whose expression combined disbelief and barely concealed annoyance. As I accepted the award, a sleek glass sculpture symbolizing innovation, I gathered my thoughts quickly, aware that this moment offered a platform to articulate what authentic impact represented. Thank you for this unexpected recognition, I began. Authentic Impact was founded on a simple premise: that the most effective agency-client relationships are based on genuine partnership rather than manufactured expertise or gatekeeping. I scanned the audience, noting the mix of reactions: interest from some, skepticism from others, particularly those representing traditional agency models. The transparent collaboration model this award recognizes isn't just a service offering or a marketing approach. It's a fundamental reimagining of how agencies and clients create value together, replacing hierarchy with collaboration, opacity with transparency, dependency with partnership. I paused, then continued with conviction. As our industry evolves to meet changing client expectations and market realities, The question isn't whether agencies will transform, but how quickly and authentically we will embrace that transformation. At Authentic Impact, we believe the future belongs to those who recognize that genuine expertise demonstrates itself through results, not through controlled access or mystified processes. As I concluded my brief remarks and left the stage, the applause was substantial but not universal, a fitting response to an approach that challenged established industry norms. Returning to the evergreen table, I received enthusiastic congratulations from Diane and her team, who clearly saw the award as validation of their decision to partner with us. As the ceremony concluded and attendees moved to the reception area, I found myself approached by various industry professionals, some genuinely curious about our model, others seemingly assessing a potential competitive threat, a few exploring possible collaboration or even employment opportunities. Through these conversations, I glimpsed Victor holding court with a smaller group than usual, his expression tightly controlled as he responded to what appeared to be questions about the evening's surprise outcome. Our eyes met briefly across the room, his gaze hardening momentarily before he turned his attention back to his companions. Diane appeared at my side, champagne flute in hand. "Quite an evening," she observed with satisfaction. "Though I suspect winning that particular award has made you some powerful opponents in certain quarters." I followed her glance toward Victor's group. Opposition isn't necessarily a bad thing when you're challenging established norms. It confirms you're actually changing something meaningful. A diplomatic response, she noted with amusement, but accurate. The marketing industry doesn't change through consensus, but through demonstrated success with new approaches. Speaking of which, she gestured toward a cluster of executives across the room. Those are my counterparts from Riverside Consumer Group. They've been asking very specific questions about our decision to partner with Authentic Impact. The implications were clear. Our approach was generating interest beyond Evergreen, potentially opening doors to other major clients who were questioning traditional agency relationships. We should probably focus on executing brilliantly for Evergreen before pursuing additional accounts of that scale, I said cautiously. Maintaining quality during growth is our primary concern. Diane smiled appreciatively. And that response is precisely why our partnership will succeed. Any other agency would be calculating how quickly they could leverage our name to secure additional clients. As the evening progressed, I found myself in conversation with various industry figures, some congratulatory, others skeptical, but curious about our approach. The award had created a platform for discussing the fundamental questions about agency value that had inspired Authentic Impact's creation. Near the end of the reception, as attendees began to depart, I encountered Victor directly for the first time that evening. He approached as I was saying goodbye to Diane, waiting until she moved away before speaking. "Congratulations on your award," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "Quite an achievement for such a new agency." "Thank you, Victor," I replied. It was unexpected but gratifying to have our approach recognized. He studied me for a moment, his expression unreadable. "You've certainly made an impression in a short time. The Evergreen account, tonight's recognition, you've positioned yourself effectively." The comment framed our success as strategic, positioning rather than substantive value creation. Classic Victor, viewing everything through the lens of perception management rather than authentic contribution. "We're focused on building genuine partnerships with clients who share our values," I replied simply. "The recognition is secondary to that mission." His smile tightened slightly. "A commendable perspective. Though I wonder if your transparent collaboration model will scale effectively as client demands increase and market realities assert themselves." "That's certainly the challenge we're addressing," I acknowledged, though I believe genuine collaboration becomes more valuable at scale, not less. Victor glanced around the thinning crowd, then spoke more directly. "You know, when you left Sheldon Digital, I assumed you'd learned some difficult lessons about this industry. that connections matter, that established reputation carries weight, that decades of experience can't be replaced by idealistic new approaches. He paused, his expression shifting subtly. I underestimated your determination and your ability to articulate a compelling alternative vision. That was a significant miscalculation on my part. The acknowledgement, however reluctantly offered, represented a fundamental shift in how Victor perceived both me and Authentic Impact. No longer a naive former employee pursuing an unsustainable dream, but a legitimate competitive force, challenging his model of agency value. Thank you for that acknowledgement, I said sincerely. Though I believe what's happening isn't just about Authentic Impact specifically. It's about a broader evolution in how clients view agency relationships and measure agency value. Victor's expression hardened slightly. Trends come and go, Sophia. I've seen dozens of revolutionary approaches throughout my career. The fundamentals of this business remain constant. Clients ultimately return to established relationships and proven methodologies. Perhaps, I conceded, or perhaps what we've considered fundamental has actually been a particular historical model that's reaching the end of its effectiveness. I guess we'll both find out in the coming years. He studied me a moment longer, then offered his hand professionally. Indeed we will. In the meantime, congratulations again on your success. You've certainly made your mark. As Victor walked away, I realized that our conversation represented more than a momentary exchange between former colleagues, now competitors. It embodied the tension between established industry paradigms and emerging alternatives, between an approach built on controlled access to expertise and one founded on transparent collaboration and shared value creation. The following morning, news of the unexpected award circulated through industry publications and social media channels. Several articles specifically contrasted Authentic Impact's collaborative approach with traditional agency models, positioning our success as indicative of broader shifts in client expectations and industry dynamics. When I arrived at our office in the Breakwater building, the team had already gathered to celebrate, complete with morning pastries and coffee. The award stood on our conference table, catching the natural light that streamed through our industrial windows. Have you seen the industry coverage? Asked Zoe excitedly, showing me her tablet where marketing publications were featuring stories about the previous night's surprise outcome. They're calling it a symbolic changing of the guard, and suggesting that smaller specialized agencies with authentic values alignment might represent the future of the industry. That's a bit premature, I cautioned, though pleased by the recognition. We've had some meaningful successes, but we're still building our approach and learning as we grow. But that's exactly why this matters, Rebecca insisted. We're being recognized not for being perfect or fully formed, but for challenging assumptions about how agencies should operate and create value. The discussion continued as we shifted into our regular morning meeting, balancing celebration with focus on the substantial work ahead. The Evergreen account would require significant expansion of our team and capabilities, testing our ability to maintain our collaborative approach at larger scale. We're going to face increasing scrutiny as we grow, I acknowledged to the team. The award and the Evergreen account have raised our profile substantially. People will be watching to see if our model is sustainable beyond the startup phase, if we can deliver results at scale, if our collaborative approach can accommodate rapid growth. So we prove it can, Natalie responded simply. We grow thoughtfully. We maintain our core values. We demonstrate that authentic partnership produces better outcomes than traditional agency relationships. And we acknowledge that we're still evolving, added Jason. That transparency about our own development is part of what makes our model different. As the meeting concluded and team members returned to their projects, I remained at the conference table, reflecting on how dramatically our position had shifted in just under a year. What had begun as a response to Victor's betrayal and dismissal had evolved into a genuine alternative vision for agency practice, one that was gaining recognition and validation far beyond my initial ambitions. The traditional agency model, that Victor represented wasn't disappearing overnight. Established firms like Sheldon Digital would continue to secure major accounts, to exert significant influence over industry standards and practices, to shape how marketing services were structured and delivered. But the narrative was changing. Clients were increasingly questioning long-established assumptions about agency relationships. Industry professionals like Margaret Williams were reconsidering their own career paths and value propositions. New models like Authentic Impact were demonstrating that effective marketing partnerships could be built on different foundations than those that had dominated previous decades. My phone buzzed with a text message from Uncle Frank. "Just read about the award. Not surprised, but definitely impressed. When do I get to say, 'I told you so' about your potential?" I smiled, typing back, "You've earned that right, though you never needed external validation. Your belief in me was there from the beginning." His response came quickly. "Not belief, recognition. There's a difference. I didn't believe in your potential despite evidence. I recognized capabilities you demonstrated consistently, but didn't fully value yourself." The distinction resonated deeply. Throughout my time at Sheldon Digital, Victor had positioned himself as the believer in my talent, the cultivator of my potential, the gateway to my professional development. In reality, he had consistently undervalued my capabilities, defined my potential according to his needs, and positioned himself as the necessary intermediary between my work and its recognition. Uncle Frank, by contrast, had simply recognized what was already manifest in my approach, my insights, my capacity for leadership. He hadn't created my capabilities through his belief. He had acknowledged their existence when others, including myself, had failed to fully value them. This realization clarified something essential about the model we were building at Authentic Impact. Traditional agencies positioned themselves as creators of value, as necessary intermediaries between client capabilities and market success. Our approach recognized that clients already possess the authentic values, practices, and stories that would resonate with their audiences. Our role wasn't to create that value, but to help articulate it effectively, to connect it authentically with the right audiences, to amplify its impact through strategic communication. As I prepared for our afternoon meeting with the Evergreen team, the first working session to plan our expansion and implementation approach, I felt a profound sense of clarity about the path ahead. The challenges were substantial. Scaling our team without diluting our culture, maintaining our collaborative approach as we grew, delivering results that validated our model at larger scale. Yet the opportunity extended beyond Authentic Impact's specific success. We were contributing to a broader evolution in how agencies and clients created value together, shifting from dependency to partnership, from controlled access to transparent collaboration, from manufactured expertise to authentic co-creation. Victor had insisted I would never succeed without his connections, his platform, his endorsement. He had fundamentally misunderstood what kind of connections truly mattered in the emerging landscape. Not hierarchical relationships that reinforced dependency, but collaborative partnerships that created shared value. As I gathered my materials and headed toward the conference room where the Evergreen team awaited, I reflected on the irony that Victor's dismissal of my potential had catalyzed exactly the journey that proved him wrong. His betrayal had forced me to recognize capabilities I had always possessed but never fully claimed, to build connections based on authentic value rather than hierarchical positioning, to create a model that challenged the very assumptions about agency worth that he had used to diminish my contributions. The future of Authentic Impact remained unwritten, with challenges and opportunities that would test our model and approach. But one chapter had definitively concluded: the narrative that success in this industry required Victor's kind of connections, his approach to value creation, his model of client relationships. That story had ended. A new one was beginning, one we were writing together with clients who shared our vision of authentic partnership and transparent collaboration. And in this story, The connections that truly mattered were the ones we were building every day, genuine relationships based on shared values, mutual respect, and collaborative creation of meaningful impact. The 2-year anniversary of Authentic Impact arrived with little fanfare. We were too busy to organize a proper celebration. Our team had grown to 37 full-time members, occupying the entire top floor of the Breakwater building after an expansion 6 months earlier. The renovation had preserved the industrial character of the space while creating more functional work areas and meeting rooms designed specifically for our collaborative approach. The Evergreen account had exceeded expectations with their sustainability, communication campaign, generating industry recognition and measurable market impact. More importantly, the transparent partnership model we'd established had transformed how their marketing function operated, breaking down traditional silos between sustainability initiatives and brand communication. Our success with Evergreen had indeed attracted attention from other major brands questioning traditional agency relationships. We had been selective about growth, taking on only clients who genuinely valued our collaborative approach rather than those simply seeking a smaller or less expensive alternative to established agencies. This disciplined expansion had allowed us to maintain our core values and processes, even as we evolved from startup to established presence in the sustainability marketing space. Each new team member was carefully selected, not just for their technical skills, but for their alignment with our collaborative culture and transparent approach to client partnerships. On this particular morning, I arrived early to prepare for a significant meeting. Riverside Consumer Group, one of the largest competitors to Evergreen, had approached us about potentially handling their sustainability communication. After several preliminary discussions, they were visiting our offices for a working session to determine whether our approach could address their specific challenges. As I reviewed my notes in the main conference room, Natalie arrived with coffee, for both of us, a ritual that had persisted from our earliest days despite our growth and increasing formality in other areas. "Ready for the Riverside meeting?" she asked, setting my cup beside my laptop. Their sustainability director seemed skeptical during the video call last week. "Appropriately so," I replied. "They've invested heavily in environmental initiatives, but struggled to translate that commitment into authentic consumer communication. After 2 failed campaigns with traditional agencies, they have reason to question whether any marketing partner can solve their challenge." Natalie nodded thoughtfully. "What's particularly interesting is that they approached us despite having an existing relationship with Sheldon Digital for their primary brands." This detail had caught my attention as well. Riverside had been a Sheldon Digital client for over a decade, with Victor personally managing the relationship. Their interest in Authentic Impact for sustainability communication represented a significant departure from that established partnership. "Do you think Victor knows they're meeting with us?" Natalie asked, voicing the question I'd been considering. "Almost certainly," I replied, "though I doubt he considers it a serious threat to their overall relationship. More likely he views it as a specialized project that doesn't align with their core strengths." Before we could discuss further, our office manager informed us that the Riverside team had arrived. I gathered my materials and headed to the reception area, where 4 executives waited: their sustainability director, marketing vice president, brand manager, and consumer insights lead. "Welcome to Authentic Impact," I greeted them, leading the group toward our main conference room. "We've prepared some materials based on our preliminary discussions, but I'd like to start by understanding your current challenges more specifically." As we settled around the conference table, I noticed the sustainability director, James Chen, studying our office space with particular interest. "This is different from what I expected," he observed. "Most agencies we visit have elaborate reception areas but hide their actual workspaces. Transparency extends to our physical environment," I explained. "Clients have access to the same spaces where we develop strategy and creative work. It reinforces our collaborative approach." The morning unfolded as a genuine working session rather than a traditional pitch. Instead of presenting polished case studies and theoretical approaches, we engaged the Riverside team in defining their specific challenges, examining where previous campaigns had fallen short, and exploring how consumers were currently perceiving their sustainability efforts. Our fundamental problem, James explained, is that consumers don't believe our environmental commitments are genuine. Despite significant investments in reducing packaging waste and carbon emissions, our sustainability messaging is perceived as greenwashing, corporate marketing rather than authentic action. That's because your communication approach contradicts your actual commitment, Natalie observed, pulling up examples from their recent campaigns. Your sustainability initiatives are thoughtful, science-based, and genuinely impactful, but your marketing treats environmental responsibility as a selling feature rather than a core value. This direct assessment might have offended clients expecting traditional agency deference, but the Riverside team leaned in with interest. "Can you elaborate?" asked their marketing VP, Sandra Williams. "Your campaigns position sustainability as something you're doing for consumers rather than a fundamental commitment that shapes your business decisions," I explained. "The messaging focuses on end benefits rather than authentic process, on isolated initiatives rather than systematic transformation." The discussion deepened from there, evolving into a collaborative exploration of how Riverside might approach sustainability communication differently, not just adjusting messaging, but fundamentally rethinking how they engaged consumers around environmental responsibility. By lunchtime, we had moved from diagnostic analysis to potential frameworks for a new approach. The energy in the room was palpable, with Riverside executives actively contributing rather than passively evaluating our presentation. This was precisely the dynamic we cultivated at Authentic Impact: genuine collaboration rather than performative pitching. As we broke for lunch, catered in our common area, James pulled me aside. "This has been remarkably productive," he said, quietly. Though I should mention something that might complicate matters. Victor Sheldon personally called our CEO yesterday to express concern about this meeting. This revelation didn't particularly surprise me, though the timing suggested Victor was more concerned about our potential involvement than I'd assumed. "What was the nature of his concern?" I asked. He suggested that while Authentic Impact might have interesting approaches to boutique sustainability projects, we would be taking an unnecessary risk by entrusting a critical brand dimension to an unproven agency without the resources to support a company of our scale. The criticism was familiar. The same objections Victor had raised since our founding, despite our proven success with clients like Evergreen. What interested me more was his apparent awareness of the specific purpose of today's meeting. "How did he know you were exploring sustainability communication specifically?" I asked. James looked uncomfortable. "That's the interesting part. The meeting was only mentioned in internal communications. Someone from our side must have informed him about the nature of our discussions." This development added a layer of complexity to the situation. Victor wasn't just aware of Riverside's interest in Authentic Impact. He was actively working to undermine our potential partnership through his established connections within their organization. "I appreciate your transparency about this," I said. "It actually relates directly to the challenge we've been discussing. Authentic sustainability communication requires aligned values throughout the organization. If there are internal constituencies that prefer traditional agency relationships, that's something we should address openly rather than ignore." James nodded appreciatively. "That perspective is exactly why we're here despite Victor's objections. After 2 failed campaigns, we need a fundamentally different approach, not just better execution of the same strategy." When we reconvened after lunch, I decided to address the situation directly. "Before we continue, I understand that Victor Sheldon has expressed concerns about Authentic Impact's capacity to handle your sustainability communication needs. Given your existing relationship with Sheldon Digital, I think it's important we discuss this openly. The marketing VP looked startled, then resigned. I apologize for that intervention. Victor and our CEO have a long-standing relationship. When he learned about this meeting, he felt compelled to offer his perspective. No apology necessary, I replied. It actually presents an opportunity to clarify something important about our approach. We don't see other agencies, including Sheldon Digital, as direct competitors in the traditional sense. We're building a different model of agency partnership altogether. I paused, then continued thoughtfully. If your organization determines that our approach doesn't align with your needs or culture, we would fully support you continuing with Sheldon Digital or another traditional agency. What matters is finding the right fit for your specific challenges, not winning accounts for their own sake. This stance, prioritizing appropriate fit over business development, visibly surprised the Riverside team. In an industry defined by aggressive competition and territorial account management, our willingness to walk away from potential business unless values aligned was distinctly unconventional. That's refreshingly direct, Sandra acknowledged. Though I'd like to clarify that we're exploring this potential partnership precisely because traditional agency approaches haven't delivered the results we need in sustainability communication. The afternoon session continued with even greater engagement, as the Riverside team seemed to appreciate that we were evaluating mutual fit rather than simply pursuing their business. By the session's conclusion, we had outlined a potential framework for transforming their sustainability communication based on authentic collaboration between our organizations. The next step would be a similar session, including your product development and operations teams, I suggested. Authentic sustainability communication can't be developed in isolation from the people actually implementing your environmental initiatives. James nodded enthusiastically. That integrated approach makes perfect sense. I'll coordinate calendars and get back to you with potential dates. As the Riverside team prepared to leave, Sandra lingered behind the others. I want to address Victor's intervention directly, she said once her colleagues had moved toward the elevator. It's not the first time he's attempted to block exploration of alternative agency partners. That doesn't surprise me, I acknowledged. Traditional agency models depend on exclusive relationships and controlled access to expertise. She nodded, her expression becoming more candid. What you may not know is that Victor's sustainability division has lost 5 major accounts in the past 18 months. Evergreen was just the first and most visible departure. His approach is increasingly out of step with how clients want to communicate about environmental responsibility. This information provided valuable context for Victor's intervention with Riverside's CEO. His concern wasn't just about potentially losing a portion of an existing client relationship. It was about the accelerating erosion of a business segment he had specifically developed to counter the threat that Authentic Impact and similar agencies represented. That context is helpful, I replied, though our focus remains on building the right partnerships rather than competing for market share. Sandra smiled slightly. That perspective is exactly why we're having this conversation despite Victor's objections. The industry is changing, and Sheldon Digital seems increasingly unable to evolve with it. After the Riverside team departed, I shared this additional context with Natalie as we debriefed about the session. Victor's intervention makes more sense now, she observed. He's not just protecting a client relationship, he's trying to stem a broader exodus from his sustainability division. Which explains why he contacted their CEO directly, rather than trusting his agency's work to speak for itself, I added. He's operating from a position of defensiveness rather than confidence. As we continued our discussion, analyzing the session and planning potential next steps with Riverside, our office manager interrupted with an unusual message. Victor Sheldon is in reception asking to speak with you. Natalie and I exchanged surprised glances. In the 2 years since founding Authentic Impact, Victor had never once visited our offices, or sought direct contact outside industry events. Did he mention the purpose of his visit? I asked. Only that it's regarding a matter of mutual professional interest, and that he would prefer to speak privately. I considered declining the unexpected visit, but recognized that whatever had prompted Victor to come to our territory must be significant. Please show him to the small conference room, I decided. I'll meet him there in 5 minutes. Natalie raised an eyebrow. Want me to join you? I shook my head. I think this conversation needs to happen directly. But stay close. I may want your perspective afterward. After taking a moment to collect my thoughts, I made my way to the small conference room where Victor waited. He stood looking out. The window at the harbor view, his posture rigid despite his attempt at casual observation. He turned as I entered, his expression carefully neutral. "Sophia," he greeted me, extending his hand. "Thank you for seeing me without an appointment." "Of course," I replied, shaking his hand professionally. "What brings you to the Breakwater building?" He glanced around the conference room, taking in the reclaimed wood table, the comfortable seating, the wall of windows that eliminated any need for artificial lighting during daylight hours. "Impressive space," he observed. "You've come quite a distance from your early days." "We've grown thoughtfully," I acknowledged, though our core approach remains consistent regardless of physical surroundings. Victor nodded, then came to the point with uncharacteristic directness. "I understand you met with the Riverside team today regarding their sustainability communication." So this was indeed about Riverside, and his intervention had apparently failed to prevent their visit to Authentic Impact. "We did," I confirmed simply, offering no additional details. He studied me for a moment, perhaps expecting defensiveness or competitive positioning. When I offered neither, he continued. "Riverside has been a Sheldon Digital client for 12 years. Our relationship extends across their entire brand portfolio and all marketing functions." "I'm aware of your established partnership," I replied. "We discussed it openly during their visit today." This direct acknowledgement seemed to momentarily disrupt his prepared approach. He paused, recalibrating. "Then you understand that fragmenting their marketing activities between multiple agencies would potentially undermine brand consistency and strategic integration." "That's certainly one perspective," I agreed. Though many organizations successfully work with specialized partners for distinct communication needs while maintaining brand coherence. Victor's expression tightened slightly. "Let me be more direct, Sophia. Riverside's sustainability initiatives fall within Sheldon Digital's scope of work. Their exploration of alternative partners represents a breach of our established relationship, one I've already discussed with their CEO." I considered this claim carefully, recognizing the traditional agency territorial perspective it represented. "Victor, with respect, clients determine the scope of agency relationships, not the other way around. If Riverside is exploring alternative approaches to sustainability communication that reflects their assessment of their current needs, an assessment potentially influenced by industry trends rather than strategic considerations," he countered. "Specialized boutique agencies may appear innovative, but they lack the integrated perspective and comprehensive resources that major brands require." The argument was familiar, the same position Victor had maintained since our founding, despite mounting evidence that clients increasingly valued specialized expertise and authentic alignment over traditional agency scale and scope. "Clients like Riverside are sophisticated enough to evaluate which agency model best serves their specific challenges," I replied. "Our responsibility is to be transparent about our capabilities and approach, allowing them to make informed decisions that serve their business needs." Victor studied me for a long moment, perhaps recognizing that traditional competitive positioning wasn't proving effective. His approach shifted subtly. "You've built something impressive here, Sophia. Authentic Impact has established a legitimate position in the sustainability marketing space, an achievement worth acknowledging. The compliment, however strategic, represented a significant evolution from his previous dismissal of our model as unsustainable or our success as temporary. "Thank you," I replied, genuinely appreciating the acknowledgement. "Though we measure our success by client outcomes rather than industry perception." He nodded, then continued, "Which is why I wanted to speak with you directly about a potential opportunity. Sheldon Digital has been exploring strategic acquisitions to strengthen specific practice areas, particularly in sustainability communication, where specialized perspectives have demonstrated market value." The implication was clear, but still surprising. Victor wasn't just acknowledging Authentic Impact's legitimacy. He was suggesting the possibility of acquiring our agency to strengthen Sheldon Digital's sustainability capabilities. "Are you proposing that Sheldon Digital might be interested in acquiring Authentic Impact?" I asked directly, wanting to eliminate any potential misunderstanding. "I'm suggesting we might explore mutually beneficial arrangements," he replied, carefully. "Your specialized approach integrated within Sheldon Digital's comprehensive resources could create significant value for clients like Riverside, who need both authentic sustainability communication and integrated brand strategy." The proposal represented a remarkable evolution in Victor's perception of Authentic Impact, from dismissing our model as unsustainable to considering it valuable enough to acquire. Yet it also revealed his continued attachment to the traditional agency paradigm, wherein independent perspectives are ultimately absorbed into established structures rather than allowed to genuinely transform industry practices. "That's certainly an unexpected perspective," I acknowledged, "though it raises fundamental questions about how our approach would maintain its integrity within a traditional agency structure." Victor smiled slightly, perhaps sensing an opening for negotiation. "Every acquisition requires thoughtful integration planning. Your leadership would be essential in preserving what makes Authentic Impact effective while accessing Sheldon Digital's scale and capabilities." I considered his proposal not just as a business opportunity, but as a reflection of how fundamentally the industry landscape had shifted. 2 years ago, Victor had insisted I would never succeed without his connections. Now he was suggesting that his agency needed our approach to remain competitive in key market segments. "I appreciate you bringing this perspective directly," I said finally. "It's certainly something that would require careful consideration given the fundamental differences in our agency models." Victor nodded, apparently satisfied to have established the possibility rather than securing immediate interest. "Of course, these explorations typically develop over time. For now, I simply wanted to open the conversation and acknowledge the value you've created here." As our meeting concluded and I escorted Victor back to reception, I noticed several team members watching with barely concealed curiosity. His presence in our space represented a collision of past and present, of traditional industry hierarchy and emerging alternative models. After Victor departed, I returned to find Natalie waiting in my office, her expression a mixture of disbelief and amusement. Well, what did Victor want that was important enough to visit the Breakwater building personally? I shared the substance of our conversation, including his surprising suggestion about potential acquisition. Natalie listened with widening eyes, then burst into laughter when I finished. "Victor wants to buy Authentic Impact? The agency he insisted would never succeed without his connections? The model he dismissed as unsustainable idealism?" She shook her head in amazement. That might be the most vindicating development yet. Her reaction captured the irony perfectly, yet I found myself considering the proposal more thoughtfully than I might have expected. It's certainly validating that he now sees value in what we've built, though an acquisition would fundamentally compromise the alternative model we've established. "Exactly," Natalie agreed, becoming more serious. "He doesn't want to adopt our approach. He wants to absorb it, to control what he couldn't prevent, to own what he failed to understand." Her assessment aligned with my own instincts. Victor's proposal wasn't about embracing transformation, but about maintaining control over how agency value was defined and delivered. Acquiring authentic impact would allow Sheldon Digital to claim our specialized expertise without fundamentally changing their hierarchical approach to client relationships. I don't think Victor fully appreciates how contradictory his proposal is, I observed. Our approach isn't a service offering that can be integrated into a traditional agency structure. It's a fundamentally different understanding of how value is created in client partnerships. Before we could discuss further, my phone rang with a call from James Chen at Riverside. I wanted to let you know that Victor visited our CEO again this afternoon. He began without preamble. Apparently, your meeting triggered immediate action on his part. What was the nature of his visit? I asked, though I could reasonably guess. He proposed a complete restructuring of our relationship with Sheldon Digital, including dedicated sustainability specialists and direct access to creative teams, essentially offering a version of the collaborative model we discussed with you today. This rapid response confirmed that Victor viewed Riverside's interest in authentic impact as a significant threat, one requiring immediate countermeasures rather than confident reliance on their established relationship. That's a substantive offer, I acknowledged. Has it changed your perspective on potential next steps? There was a pause before James replied. Actually, it reinforced our interest in working with authentic impact. If Victor is suddenly willing to transform their approach after 12 years of traditional agency service, it validates our assessment that something fundamental needs to change in how we communicate about sustainability. After the call concluded, I shared this development with Natalie, who saw its significance immediately. Victor's defensive reaction is actually accelerating the industry transformation. Even if clients don't ultimately choose authentic impact, specifically, they're demanding the kind of transparent collaboration and authentic alignment we represent. This observation crystallized something I had been sensing over recent months. Our impact extended beyond the specific clients we served. Directly, we were contributing to a broader evolution in how the entire industry approached agency-client relationships. The traditional model Victor represented, hierarchical, controlling, based on manufactured expertise and gatekeeping, was increasingly undermined not just by authentic impact, but by changing client expectations and emerging alternative approaches across the industry landscape. As we prepared for our team's afternoon planning session, I reflected on the remarkable journey from Victor's dismissal of my potential to his proposal for acquiring the agency I had built. The irony was profound but also instructive, revealing how fundamentally the industry was transforming despite resistance from established players. Victor had insisted I would never succeed without his connections, his platform, his endorsement. What neither of us had fully anticipated was how thoroughly that assumption would be challenged by changing market dynamics, evolving client expectations, and the emergence of new models for creating and delivering value. The future remained, unwritten, with challenges and opportunities that would continue to test our approach and commitments. But one chapter had definitively concluded: the narrative that success in this industry required conforming to traditional hierarchies, accepting established power dynamics, or seeking validation from gatekeepers like Victor. That story had ended. A new one was emerging, one defined by authentic partnership, transparent collaboration, and genuine alignment between values and actions. And in this evolving narrative, the connections that truly mattered weren't the ones Victor had offered to control, but the ones we had built through demonstrated value, shared purpose, and mutual respect. As I joined our team for the afternoon session, I felt profound gratitude for the journey that had brought us here. Not despite Victor's betrayal, but because of it. His dismissal of my potential had catalyzed the very transformation that now challenged his understanding of how value was created in our industry. Sometimes the most powerful response to "you'll never succeed without me" isn't just proving you can succeed independently. It's demonstrating that success itself can be redefined in ways that transform not just individual careers, but entire industries. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.